I know it's on recording, but kia ora, Jeff. How are you, buddy?
Kia ora, how are you, Shane? You right?
Good, thank you. Yes, yep. Excuse me.
Another day of Zoom.
Another Zooming day. Yes. Yeah. Good weather though. We had a meeting before and it got out around the block, walked the dog around, so that's nice.
Yeah, it is. It is nice. Yeah. I'd sooner be at the council than here, though. I mean, I don't mean it not from the point of view at home. I find it much easier on council meetings at the council itself.
I think you're absolutely right. And I just get a sense of home is for home.
Yeah.
Work is for work, business is for business. And I think when we tend to work from home, we blur the whole lines between what's a rest and what isn't. So that's important, I think, Jeff. So I'll jump on mute anyway.
Yeah, mate.
Talk to you later.
Feels like we need some elevator music playing in the background, just so that everyone knows that their microphones and speakers are working. If you're joining us for this meeting, we'll just give it another minute and then we'll be underway.
Kia ora, Sam.
You hum it, Sam, we'll play it.
Yeah.
I got some new seeing eyeglasses the other day and I didn't realize they were tinted. They got a bit of a dark tint to them, so kind of a Roy Orbison feel when I look into the camera there.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah. I was wondering why it's so light. I kept taking them on and off and on. I thought, what the heck?
Put your dirty dogs on, mate.
Just if anybody's wondering, that's all.
Yeah. Well, welcome along to today's council meeting, 22nd of September 2021. If you're joining us online and watching this Zoom meeting or watching this later on YouTube, thanks for taking an interest in what your council's up to here in Waikirikiri, Selwyn. The reason that we're still doing this meeting via Zoom is the needs to wear masks in public spaces, and council building being a public space means we have to do things a bit differently than at your local cafe. And at a cafe when we're sitting down, you were able to take the masks off. We're unable to do that at council, and my experience over the last 2 weeks at meetings where we've had to keep masks on just don't quite flow the same. It's very hard to hear people, and that can be very difficult. So we've gone with continuing in Zoom to hopefully allow quality interaction and people to feel that they can partake in the meeting that we've got here. So apologies for this meeting. I haven't received any. I haven't done a count up on screen, but is anyone aware of anyone that is not here today? No, I'll be an apology from 3:30 this afternoon if we're not finished, and Malcolm will be taking over the chair at that point. Are there any conflicts of interest that people?
Has Deborah joined you?
Yes, Deborah's here. Any conflicts of interest that people would like to raise that aren't already recorded?
My reception is not that good.
No. That's okay, we can see you. And if you need to say anything, maybe try without the video. That might help the reception, or you can just note it in the chat. Identification of any extraordinary business. I haven't made aware of any. David, are you?
No, there's nothing. No additional business received or requested, Mr. Mayor.
Right. So we'll open up with karakia and council affirmation. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai, ihi akia nā te atukura, he hio, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauri ora. And the council affirmation. Let us affirm today that as councillors we'll work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. And so just for a reminder around how the meeting will work, for voting, if you can please raise your hands just so I can see hands raised as a vote in favour. If you want to vote against something, I may see your hand, but it'll be easier if you use your microphone and make that known to the meeting. And if you'd like to speak to an item, if you can use the raise hand function in Zoom, that would be helpful because it just brings you to the top of the list, and I make sure that I don't miss anyone who would like to share during the course of the meeting. We've got matters requiring attention, and there's a land issue that is on our agenda later today around Crack Road. So we move to confirmation of minutes. The public, I'm reading the wrong one, sorry. We move to the minutes, and we want the confirmation of minutes from the Wednesday, the 8th of September. Is there a mover and a seconder for those minutes?
Also moved.
That's great, Mark.
I have sent through a correction to a paragraph in your report where it suggested I moved an amendment where I actually just recommended it. There was no formal moving of an amendment in the process that would involve.
Great, thanks, Mark. That'll be changed. Thank you for sending that through, and seconded, Malcolm. Is there anyone like to speak or comment on those minutes? No. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you. And we move on then to the Chief Executive's report. David, I'll hand over to you.
Sorry, just lost my screen, unmuted myself. So to largely take it as read, I'll just speak to a couple of the items. Item 1, just for the awareness, the epidemic preparedness notice has now been extended for another 2 months through to the 19th of December. So that means that we can continue to run meetings by way of Zoom or audio links to meet quorum requirements. Item 2 is Three Waters engagement. And this links back to recommendation B, delegating authority to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee to finalise Council's response to government on its Three Waters proposal at its meeting on 29 September, which is next Wednesday. The reason for that, councillors, is that whilst we have had the privilege of attending a couple of meetings and receiving a lot of information on Three Waters, our public information piece has only started this week, and that will give us the 7 days that we need to gather the information to respond. That response has got to be with the Minister by the end of work on the 1st of October, which is a Friday. I have discussed this proposal both with the Mayor and also with the Chair of Audit and Risk. All councillors will be invited to attend the Audit and Risk Subcommittee on the 29th. That meeting will be by way of Zoom. The Chair will grant permission to non-Audit and Risk Subcommittee members to speak during this particular item. Item number 3, Mr Mayor and councillors, is just to acknowledge, in response to a councillor request, we have extended consultation on proposed speed limit changes for a further month through to the 8th of October. Item 4 is some really compelling statistical information around the growth in new houses across Selwyn. In the year ended July 21, the number of new homes consented for Selwyn was a staggering 26.1 new dwellings per 1,000 people. National average is 8.8. And put it into context, Auckland 9.1, Christchurch 7.9. So we're staggeringly ahead of the rest of the country. And finally, just some changes to the delegation manual to reflect some changes in personnel around Armour Guard security services. Mr Mayor, happy to answer any questions on aspects of that report.
Thanks, David. I think it's sensible the timing rather than hold an extraordinary meeting, just use the meetings we've got in place and the audit and risk function around the timing for getting back to the minister. So thank you for enabling that to happen. It'll be great if councillors are able to attend that and want to add anything in. Obviously, there'll be a draft for discussion before that meeting as well. Anyone have any questions of David? Otherwise, I'll look for a mover and seconder of this report. Jenny and Bob, happy to move. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hands. And those against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you, David, for that. The next item is the representation review. And David, I'll let you carry on.
So again, this is to confirm that full council hears and deliberates on submissions to the representation review proposal. Just the reasons for that. Firstly, the proposal was considered by full council at its meeting of the 25th of August. Thus, it is the council proposal that is being consulted on, that consultation process. We're in the middle of it at the moment. The period extends through to the 4th of October. It is proposed that the morning of Wednesday, the 13th of October, be set aside, commencing at 8:30, and that time will be flexible depending on the number of submissions we receive and the hearing and deliberation process. We do have an adjacent day, Tuesday the 12th of October. I am aware that 3 councillors have advised me that that day would be difficult for them. One thing we might do, Mr. Mayor, is potentially, if we require a longer morning to do the hearing and deliberations, is that we might schedule a slightly later start for the council meeting, say push that back till 2 or 2:30. But the purpose of the paper is simply to have council sign off on the full council, hearing and deliberating on submissions. And I have discussed, for the benefit of councillors, this proposal both with the Mayor and the Chair of the Representation Review Committee prior to publishing this paper. Again, Mr. Mayor, very happy to answer questions if necessary.
Thanks, David. I think the move to Wednesday is the right one. It's our council meeting day where councillors have made themselves available to do it. If there's one or two that are unable that morning due to other commitments and this meeting not being in the diaries early enough, then we'll understand that. Given the current level of interest from the community, even at 10 minutes per speaker, I'm not sure that we'll be taking up the whole morning with a hearings process. So hopefully we can get through the morning without the needs to push back the council meeting start time in the afternoon. And I'll just say thank you to all the councillors who have been a part of the representation review meetings and drop-in sessions so far. Yeah, good to have that level of interest from councillors, and we'll just see what comes in from our community. Any questions that people have of David from this report? No, mover and seconder. Welcome, Sophie. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, please speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you, David. We now move on to page 24 of the agenda, and it's the Greater Christchurch Partnership and Urban Growth Partnership Memorandum of Agreements, and I invite Tim Harris to address the paper.
Afternoon, Mayor Sam, councillors. So I'll take this as read, but I'll just maybe step you through some of the aspects of the report. The report seeks to do 2 things, and it is following a recommendation from the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee. The 2 items are the adoption of the Greater Christchurch Growth Partnership Committee Memorandum of Agreement, and also an update on the existing Partnership Committee Memorandum of Agreement for the Greater Christchurch. So as way of background, back in 2020, there was a refocusing of the Greater Christchurch Partnership on Greater Christchurch 2050. Part of that was a closer relationship with central government, and so we've sought to advance a urban growth agenda. There's a number of these around the country. An urban growth partnership. The focus of the urban growth partnerships across the country is an urban growth agenda, which is fundamentally around improving choices about the location and type of housing, affordability, assisting in emissions and carbon reduction, and just improving the quality of our built environment. So after a number of discussions, we've reached an agreement with central government, and you'll see the roles and the priorities on my page 27 of the agenda. And we're seeking to have a parallel structure to the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee that will include representatives from central government. I think this is a very important step to build such a relationship with government. There's a lot of funding going around and assistance that we can get from such a partnership. So this paper seeks to just adopt that agreement with central government. This paper, or ones like it at least, are doing the rounds with the various partnership organisations, including Waimakariri, Christchurch City, and Ngāi So look, and really the update of the existing memorandum of agreement for the Greater Christchurch Partnership just brings that up to date with a number of different initiatives and makes explicit the role and the partnership with Runanga and Ngāi. So look, happy to answer any questions, any comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And I guess this agreement really sets up, it's parallel to, but doesn't take over the Greater Christchurch Partnership work that's already there. So this is a chance to bring ministers on board with the journey that we've been on for the last 15 years now as a Greater Christchurch Partnership. There's been a lot of discussion around the government coming up with New Zealand's solutions for Auckland's problems, or for other urban areas' problems. And that's because they haven't really understood the Christchurch context, because we haven't had formalised agreement around how we will engage with them on an ongoing basis. This agreement really sets that up. I think from a Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee, we might have met ministers 3 times in the last 5 years, or 4 times. It's been on an ad hoc basis when they've been available. This new agreement sets up ongoing regular meetings with cabinet ministers to ensure that they understand our aspirations, what our commitment is to it, and what the government's going to be required to not only invest in time, but also invest in money in the Greater Christchurch area. So there's a number of resolutions here around appoint and resolve and delegate. If you've got any questions on those, you're welcome to ask Tim where they sit, but really it's to enable the enacting of this agreement. And we had a presentation about a month ago on it as well. I would say it was interesting having the discussion with the ministers who will probably be with us, but they haven't confirmed exactly who that's going to be yet, around the setting of this time frame. We met probably 2 months ago, and at the conclusion of the meeting with the GCP mayors and chief executives, I said to the ministers, so this is our expectation, we're going to work at it over the next 2 months. We'll look to sign it off by our councils in September, and you'll have it signed up in October, and we'll get running. And they looked back at us and said, yes, that's exactly our timetable as well. So we'll be looking to do that too. So it was nice to know that the work's gone on in the background, that staff are making sure that everyone is open with their conversation so far, and that the ministers themselves are keen to continue from here on forward. So I don't know if Malcolm and Sophie want to add anything, but I certainly endorse this move and looking at the Greater Christchurch story becoming a key part of New Zealand government's knowledge. Malcolm or Sophie, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I endorse your comments, Sam. I think it's important we get involved here. As you said before, the Golden Triangle get all the emphasis in the north, and this is our real opportunity to have serious conversations with Cabinet. And we have mass rapid transit and other things we'd very much like to get on the funding from central government in the future. So I'd just like to share with you that I think this is a good opportunity, and I'm willing to move these recommendations. Thanks, Sam.
Great. Thanks, Malcolm. To move, Sophie, you happy to second? Great. Are there any further questions on this report for Tim? Shane.
Sam, kia ora, Tim. Thanks very much for the report. Thank you, Sam. While the report outlines the roles, priorities, and key functions of the group, I'm really interested in the deliverables and just what the achievable outcomes will be over the period of time. It's again, I come back to regional economic development, and I know that yourself, Sam, have spoken with ministers on that. I think we need to as a district, need to be pushing a concerted effort towards pushing towards economic growth, and what are the opportunities for our district to be a part of that. We've consistently talked about the issues with supply chain and the holdups for businesses in the area, particularly in the building industry. And I think part of this group should be focused on government support towards the initiatives surrounding opportunities for economic development and supply chain alleviation through the South Island. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. I agree with you, and Tim may have some more to add as well. We want it to be about economic development, and the joint mayors and CEs pushed that to the minister, and our officials pushed that as well. They said no. There are other mechanisms for having economic development links with government, and the Urban Growth Partnership will not be one of them. They focused this on urban growth, particularly transport planning and land use, but the economic development piece, which we were also keen to have in there, and had actually, we had some words around how we wanted that to be, were taken out by the government. Tim, do you want to add any more to that?
Not really, Sam. That's my understanding as well. I think there's other spaces that we could occupy in terms of progressing economic development, but I think the government made it fairly clear that this was not that space. So just agree with what Sam's just said.
Yeah, one of the key parts of investment will be on the mass rapid transport piece, and with the recent announcements by Waka Kotahi and NZTA, we did see that the Canterbury region was down on that level of investment in the roading and transport space, and it's mainly due to the mass rapid transport investment that the government's putting into those areas that have that plans currently. So we'll be looking to obviously have that developed further and invested here over coming time as well. Deborah and Sophie.
Thank you. With regards to education and health, how is that going to be enhanced through this agreement? I see that previously the health department's involved, but what about education, the positioning of schools for growth?
So health, oh, sorry, Tim, you go.
No, you go.
The District Health Board sits on the GCP and has been involved around the table. The education hasn't been to date, but where there have needed to be discussions have happened at a TA level, and then strategically thinking that the mayors have met to discuss things briefly, but there hasn't really been a key focus of it. And I think the investment that we've seen in schools here to date has shown that they are interested and understand the growth pressures that we have, but they're also, and we've read in the papers recently, pushing back around some of the unplanned private plan changes that we have now, and their ability to meet demand from an education space. But Tim, has there been any further discussion on education involvement from your point of view?
No, I know we do work very closely with the Ministry for Education in terms of the growth, as you said, but no, I've got nothing else to add really.
And I think, Deborah, as well, the Future for Local Government review needs to look at education as a key piece, that actually thinking as a district or sub-district level, but bigger than just a school, how the planning might happen in conjunction with what we know and what the Ministry of Education know, rather than just one department making a decision on school location and timing as well.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks. Sophie.
Kia ora koutou. Just wanted to add that, particularly in terms of Shane's point around economic development, it might not be included in this, but there's other work, as Sam and Tim have said, that does seek to encourage it. So there's the MRT stuff, which is essentially made more likely if we've got government involved now. The GC 2050 stuff includes economic development goals, and there's the Greater Christchurch spatial planning that's coming on, which includes transport corridors, land use planning, and everything else. So it's in there. It just might not be in this particular agreement, but it is part of the wider work project.
Cool. Thanks, Sophie, for that. Moved and seconded, Malcolm and Sophie. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And all those against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. We move on to it's tab 12, 64 on the online agenda, Regional Waste Minimisation Coordination in Canterbury. And I welcome Andrew Boyd to the meeting. Andrew, I'll hand the floor to you.
Great, thank you everybody. Good afternoon. So the report in today's meeting from Solid Waste is seeking support from Council for two things. Firstly, the creation of a shared role working across councils within the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee, and secondly, to invite ECAN to rejoin the committee. In terms of the shared role, it's envisaged that this role would be located at ECAN. The role would be funded from the waste levy, with Selwyn's total contribution to the Joint Waste Committee increasing from roughly 7,800 per annum to 20,800 per annum. And this equates to about 11% of the total funding from those contributing councils. This can be accommodated within the existing funding we have. There's more than enough work for a person in this role. There's a number of opportunities for more regional collaboration and more consistency amongst the Canterbury councils that aren't currently being taken up. Some of those have been outlined in the report. This person would, in that role, assess some of the project applications that are being made to the Joint Waste Committee, monitor those approved projects and report back to the staff in the committee, something that isn't quite happening as well as it could be. And then also there's a raft of changes and consultation coming through from central government over the next couple of years on product stewardship work, container refund schemes, waste levy changes, a new national waste levy, changes to the Waste Act, an emissions reduction plan, and also a national plastics action plan. So keeping across these and coordinating and discussing positions on these, as well as, sorry, my talking notes have just popped off. Give me 2 seconds. Joys of Zoom. Okay. As well as forming submissions as a group is important. There's also a number of other council initiatives that could be a part of this role. In terms of ECAN rejoining the Joint Waste Committee, I'm not really sure that needs much explanation. It seems like a no-brainer really to have them on board with waste-related initiatives in the South Island. That's everything. Happy to receive any questions.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Grant, and then Mark.
It's not a question, Sam. I'd just like to move the motion and support it. I'm obviously on that committee, and it's really a refocus by the committee to try and up the ante as to our position on waste minimisation, particularly noting that this year Cape Valley is in its 20th year, and when it was established, it was envisaged that by year 20 we'd be in a zero waste position and wouldn't need Cape Valley. Clearly we're not there, so this is an attempt to start to provide more emphasis on the minimisation and getting rid of waste before it comes into the disposal work stream. And Andrew's certainly described it very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mark?
Thank you. I'm happy to second these sets of recommendations. I do have a suggestion for a small amendment for clause 2, if Grant would agree, that it agree that a new shared and jointly funded staff position be created. That just adds clarity to the reader of the recommendations that it's not only a shared position, but it's jointly funded. So otherwise, I'm very happy to second these recommendations.
Thank you. Andrew, on that, is this the same recommendation going to every council?
Very similar. There's some slight changes in wording around some of those types of comments that have been just made by Mark.
Okay,
so
I don't think
no
that,
issue with that. Yep.
No, it doesn't change the intent of where we're going. Grant, are you happy with that as the mover?
Oh, I'm happy with it, but I think the descriptor pretty much carries it. It's a shared council staff position. It's quite implicit in the wording, but if you want to make it clearer again, I'm happy to let that happen. But I think it's already pretty well described. Any views from the rest of the councillors?
No, we'll just add that shared piece in then and provides that clarity. Moved Councillor Miller, seconded Councillor Alexander. Shane, you had your hand up before as well. Did you want to say something?
Kia ora, thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. I did have it up, but then I put it down. I just wanted a point of clarification that the increase from 112,000 to 192,000 is inflation adjustment. And just secondly, a question for Andrew: what are some of the key benefits with having ECAN around the table? Do you see opportunity for shared resource as well to be part of that? Thank you.
Yep, sure. So the increase is partly as a result of population changes. So our percentage as a contributor to that area has altered as our population has, based on the latest census figures. And secondly, the increase relates to the additional funds for that newly proposed role yet to be created. Yeah. ECAN's invitation to the party or the group would be, they have kept in good contact. So their contribution would be financial, and also I mean, Grant might better potentially talk about this better than I can, but they, as the regulatory body that covers discharges to air and water and land, just makes absolute sense for them to be involved with anything related to the waste sphere. Yeah, they have specialists in contaminated land, which, you know, looking at that report on the closed landfills, can certainly bring a lot to that area. Yeah, a range of benefits. Yeah, I'm not doing a good job of describing it, but yeah.
Great, thank you, Andrew, for that. Shane, that covers your question. Yep, cool. Moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. And anyone against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thanks, Andrew. Very brave coming back this week, and see you next time.
Thank you.
We'll move on to tab number 13. It's on 74 of the electronic agenda, and this is a transportation monthly update. Welcome Andrew Maisie and Mark Chamberlain to the meeting. Andrew, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. Thanks very much. Lovely to see you all on Zoom. I prefer to see you all in person, but needs must. I'll kick off in terms of the monthly report. Obviously, I suspect the most interesting topic will be the final funding approval by the Wakatahi NZTA Transport Agency on our program. And this is the 3-year program from 2021 to 24. And I'll just run through the main figures in the report just to get you up to speed on that. So for our routine maintenance operations and renewals, our previous 3-year budget was around 41 million, and the final allocation is now 49 million. That is a significant step up from what their indicative allocation was earlier in the year. So that means we've actually achieved 95% of what we had asked for, and that represents a 22% increase in funding levels from the previous 3-year period, which I think is a very good result. I think from what I understand, the movement there has been movement across all the bids enabled by the agency since the indicative allocation was approved or indicated, where they have borrowed another $2 billion to be able to meet some of these commitments and bump up these funding requests, which were probably a little bit unrepresentative of what people wished previously. So just looking, if you had the time in Appendix A, but that shows a graph of where those funding increases have come in, and particularly for council, it's around the sealed road maintenance, the reseals and the rehabs in terms of the road reconstructions, where our major uplift has been achieved in terms of funding. The other aspect is that they were quite happy with our sort of arguments at the end of the day in terms of our increase in growth and linking that to land use, but also I think the commitment that the council showed through the LTP in regards to being serious around lifting levels of service and the extra funding, for instance, the $1 million that we were prepared to front up ourselves to get things moving. So I think that all played very well in our favour in terms of what eventuated. And as I circulated in an email earlier this morning, and apologies for being a bit late on that, you can see how we compare regionally, and we've actually done extremely well compared to across the region, with the second highest increase around, as I said before, about 22% on our program, which is great. In terms of the other aspect of the approvals was around the low cost, low risk program. That's projects up to $2 million. And so our previous program was around $4 million over the 3 years. We'd asked for nearly 11 million and we achieved 6.5 million. Now, as I have the breakdown there, most of the Road to Zero safety projects were funded, 81% of that. All the public transport projects were funded, and that's probably due to the fact that we're part of that Greater Christchurch PT Futures business case. The areas where it probably dropped down to just under half of what we requested was walking and cycling projects and local road improvements. You may be thinking, well, that's a bit strange, and I agree with you, and particularly in regards to the walking and cycling projects, because particularly in our Greater Christchurch partnership role, our contribution to mode shift around walking, cycling, and also travel demand management is very much hinged on a lot of those projects. And that is, for instance, represented in the fact of Council's annual Footpath Extension program and some cycleway projects. You'll see, just following on from that, those projects in low cost, low risk that were declined by the NZTA for funding at the moment. And as I said, that includes the annual Footpath Extension program, the Glen Tunnel to Whitecliff Cycleway, school frontage safety upgrades, and some small bridge replacements. As I explained in the report, one of the reasons around this is much more rigid criteria that the NZTA have to assess our programs by, which inadvertently, I think, from NZTA's perspective, dropped out a number of these projects that would normally quite easily sail through. And certainly we have raised this issue with the NZTA in terms of needing to perhaps reconsider this approach. But I think the thing is that we need to perhaps think about, and we'll talk about this a little bit further in the report, on how we may meet this requirement or expectations that I believe the community has around some of these projects. In terms of major projects over 2 million, it's very pleasing that we've been able to, looks like, secure the funding for the next 2 major Prebbleton intersection upgrades. That's over $10 million worth. So that's great news. And following on from that, the Road Safety Promotion Behaviour Program has also achieved a substantial lift of around 62%, which is very pleasing and will enable our 2 road safety coordinators to get out there and do even better work than what they're doing now. So just in summary, in terms of leaving aside the major projects like the big Prebbleton intersection upgrades, our standard business as usual program has increased from 45 million to 57 million over the next 3 years, which is a 26% increase overall. And as I said, that doesn't include the activities we fund directly ourselves. So I think that is, in my personal opinion, a great result. But we do have a few flies in the ointments in regards to how some of those other low cost, low risk program projects have dropped out, how we bring those back on board. And I gave you a few options to think about, and no doubt we'll probably need to talk about this a bit further, but basically we could defer those projects and then readdress them for a subsequent annual plan or long-term plan process. We can wait for the Transport Agency to come back around to us and see if they may consider refunding some of those projects further on into the 3-year period. Or my personal favourite is basically being able to use the $1 million that we allocated per year for supporting increasing in NZTA funding over and above the NZTA funding, that we utilise that to bring on board some of these important low cost, low risk projects that I think the community has high expectations around that we deliver. And that would be, for instance, the Glen Tunnel to Whitecliff Cycleway and the Footpath Extension program, the school frontage upgrades and the small bridge replacements, which we already got committed into that one up and around Harper Road there. So just to sort of summarise that in some respects, the advantage in this situation is that we already have our 49% share of those projects sitting funded in our long-term plan, so that's great. What we have to do is essentially replace the 51% that the agency is not supplying. So on those, say, 4 key projects, that would require us to put into that 600,000 to basically bring those projects back online in terms of being fully funded, that we can proceed. If, for instance, we looked at all the projects across low cost, low risk for the first year, that would actually increase to $1 million. So you can see there's a substantial sort of investment needed. But again, we just need to have that conversation on where and how far you are prepared to go on this in regards to that type of aspect. So that's pretty much that in terms of that aspect. And I don't know, Mayor Sam, whether you want to pause here and answer some questions, considering it's a fairly meaty subject in here, or do you want me to continue on?
I think if you just finish your part of the report, Andrew, and then we'll come back for anything before we hand over to Mark.
Okay, that's fine. So following on from that, also I can report on a few other bits and pieces going on in terms of the PT, ECAN, public transport and the fare review. As I said in the report, we had that initial stakeholder meeting on the 28th of July. Just after I wrote the report, we got the notification that we had a further workshop online on the 16th of September, which we attended in terms of finding out what ECAN's sort of suggestions were around this fare review. And I know a few of the councillors here today who were part of that meeting, and it was appreciated their comments at that time in terms of being able to guide that process further forward. And no doubt when we get that a little bit further defined, we can report back on that a bit more better than I have at the moment. Plan change requests, they keep on rolling through. We've done 73, we've got 78 and 76 now, evidence being produced for that. So it's all systems go in that area. In regards to the Rolleston NZ Up project, I had indicated in the report that the agency was looking to do a bit of a key stakeholder workshop towards the end of the month. I've since been informed that they are still needing to do a bit more homework on all the situation, and it may take them a little bit more time to get to that point based on trying to get a bit more rigour around some of these assessments that are needed so that that can be reported back. West Melbourne traffic signals, again, nothing too much to report there. It just carries on. We'll probably make a small report or reference in the next monthly report to the designation process that is needed involving some of the council land to make that work. So watch the space for that. And the other aspect in terms of the agency also wants to come and talk to the council around a bit of an update on NZ Up, and in terms of particularly your interest, no doubt, in the Brougham Street project, which has sort of had disappeared for a while, but now has come sort of back into the limelight in terms of what the agency is planning to do. And it also obviously needs to work in conjunction with the City Council, which there's still a few things to be ironed out in that space. So in regards to just quickly on the councillor requests, in terms of the Glen Tunnel undergrounding, I believe we've been starting to have that conversation with Orion to get those works underway, which is great. The other one that I've added in there this time is in terms of Councillor Bob and Jenny, is regarding just a quick update on this Castle Hill lighting and where we've got to with that. If you may have been aware, we had been suffering from a number of problems with Castle Hill lighting, with people interfering with or vandalising the existing street lights by either disconnecting wiring, removing fuses, painting over the lights to block them out. And so it's been a long going problem. And basically we put it to the community that, well, look, as far as the council is concerned, we would be happy to move on removing these lights on these private right-of-ways, which to be honest shouldn't be there in the first place, if we had a resolution from the committee to do so. We have now received that resolution, and so we feel like we are in a position to move forward on removing those lights, or even at best disconnecting them from our street lighting network, because they're on a private right-of-way when we don't, as a council policy, maintain and supply power to lights on private right-of-ways. This seems to have been an anomaly from late Melbourne days when perhaps some of these things snuck through. So we're just basically trying to clean up these two aspects in terms of preventing further vandalism and also reducing our issues in regards to having to maintain these lights that seem to get interfered with all the time. So that would be my part of the report. Thanks, Mayor Sam.
Great, thank you. And some good work there from the Castle Hill Community Association, not a committee of council, but doing some good work out in Castle Hill. So thank you to the people on that committee. There's a few things, Andrew, that congratulations on getting the lift that we did. There was some joint work, I know, at a staff level, and I know at a political level. I was involved as well, and having James Cagle come on board, and he was obviously very supportive in it too. So sort of attacking it from lots of different angles, and to receive, I guess it seemed like really good news, because we were expecting, about a 10% drop from what we thought what we had committed to the community. We still didn't execute what we asked for, but it was a massive improvement from where we were. So well done for that work. I support option C as far as funding the work that didn't get across the line. It means that we're only using that $1 million as a 51% contribution on top of our 49 already contributed, rather than coming up with projects where 100% of the funding would come out of that $1 million. So I think it's better use of the $1 million, and also makes pretty strong community feedback that we've heard over a number of years for those particular projects. So I think we should confirm option C today and allow you to get on with the work of completing those projects. And lastly, just some feedback around a recent meeting with Tomutu and discussion around bilingual signage for our towns, and thinking about how we have signs and entering our towns. And this probably follows on from some of the discussions at the last meeting around the location of signs, where we have to slow down to 50 or 60 as you enter into our towns, and how we might go about changing those things. And the discussion was that if we're going to think about, and last week being Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, how we might actually acknowledge the names that we have within Selwyn that aren't particularly well known. Welcome to Tauwhare Kakaho, as well as Rolleston. Having those two names is going to be important. That the money to make those changes isn't currently in the budget, and we're going to need to come up with a process around how we would determine the scope of the job, how we would fund the job, and then how it would be implemented. So wondering for a future report from yourself whether you might be able to outline how something like that could be achieved, and then as a council we could look at the time frame you suggest and the funding models that you suggest as well. So just to provide that feedback to you, and look forward to that in a future report. There are Sophie and then Bob.
Kia ora, Andrew. How you doing? Hey, I'm happy to second the idea of going with option C. I like that idea. The projects are already identified. We already know people are okay with them. And if it fits that extra $1 million budget, then that's just perfect, to be honest. It is kind of disappointing, I guess, that like nationally it seems the NLTP kind of likes to promote and put nice flashy fit pictures of buses and cycleways and stuff, but actually when the money panned out, it was quite business as usual, to be honest. My main question though was with the Castle Hill lights, is that something that can we remove them and use them elsewhere, or will they be sort of stranded assets in a small kind of way?
The lights themselves and the poles are quite bespoke. They've been specifically, when Castle Hill first started up, designed specifically for them. I think that would be the type of thing that we would put those in storage and just use them for parts in terms of needing to, if we have to do maintenance on the rest of the lights in the township. But having said that, we are quite keen to work towards the dark sky initiative, and I suspect in the future all those lights will have to be swapped out with something that's going to work much more effectively for that purpose. But we'll need to go through and work that out at some point, what that means, and then bring that obviously back to the council to decide where to go from there. But yeah, they're just not that type of light that we can just sort of pick up and use elsewhere, unfortunately.
Thank you. And Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Castle Hill lights, I'd like to see them disconnected out at the road and the wiring and such like be left down the driveways, because I think we possibly have trouble with the people. But not only that, it leaves us somewhere to go in the future. So that would be my choice if that's possible. And the other thing is, I had this is probably between you and Mark, but I had a phone call from Glenthorne Station last week, thanking council for the work that they've done on the Harper Road, and said it's the best it's been in 10 years. And also, the Brighton Bay Road had been washed out. Glenthorne is starting on that this week to rebuild it. So that's another thing. But the query they have is with the bridge, the Harper Bridge, when that's going to be replaced so they can manage their work and getting trucks in and out. So they were, and one of the other things was going to ask about Whitecliff Walkway, but that's already been answered. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I'm sure Mark Chamberlain, his team, and also our roading contractor will be very pleased to hear about that feedback on those improvements on those roads. And as I understand it with the bridge, having talked internally here about what's happening with it, is that we're still waiting to get the resource consent from ECAN for the bridge, which seems to be dragging along somewhat, but hopefully that should be coming sooner rather than later. But if Mark's got any further updates, I'm sure he will be able to provide them later on in the report. But I would also, in terms of, I understand your point about disconnecting the lights at the boundary. I think that's probably a good first step in terms of just sort of sending the signal, well, yeah, we're over this now and we are going to take action, but we're not necessarily going to go in there with a whole lot of equipment and start disassembling things.
Thank you.
Is there any other? Oh, Shane, yes.
Is it Nicole? Kia ora. Tēnā tātou. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your report. A huge congratulations are in order for yourself and all of those involved in the significant uplift. So congratulations and thank you very much to Waka Kotahi for coming through for us. My concern, I guess, and while it would seem logical that to point C, the extra $1 million be allocated to the shortfall, I guess I seek clarification for the purpose for which that was put aside or budgeted for in the first instance. In my mind, it was ring fence for the possibility of looking at some of our unsealed roads, and if it should be used, then what is the forward program for our unsealed roads? And we heard a lot from submitters over the long-term plan around the concern, and over the past 2 years, I still continue to hear that. So whilst it would seem logical, I would like to know, what is the backup for that? The lights. I heard that you have consulted with the residents at Castle Hill. Have they voiced concerns, and has there been consultation? And just thirdly, a bigger picture or at a higher level, with the government's investment into Waka Kotahi, the $30 million over the next 3 years towards coastal shipping, considering that in our district alone, the Midland Port or Inland Port actually takes 94,000 TEU and takes away a significant amount of truck movements, I think 30,000 truck movements a year. Do you think that there's any possibility for advocating to be involved in that consultation purpose to increase that level of train or movement for getting trucks perhaps off the road? Not that to say that that's the way of the future, but definitely to be involved in the conversations for the benefit of our district. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Great questions. I'll just follow through on those. In terms of the 1 million, we had been relatively clear in our consultation in the long-term plan that we were holding this 1 million to be able to be used to supplement any shortfall in funding that the NZTA would provide. Yes, it was probably more targeted at that point around maintenance and renewal type work, but I think have got sufficient scope in what we were saying we would be using it for to increase and bring in these projects. I think the thing is that we're not going to use it all on the project, so there still will be some remaining, maybe half to maybe just under half in terms of that can be re-diverted into those maintenance areas, and that will be up to Mark and his team to sort of sit down and work out where we can get the best bang for that buck in terms of that requirement. So that helps to allay some of your concerns. I hope that does. In terms of the lighting, yes, we've done a lot of, well, when I say we have done a lot of consultation, we put the onus on the Castle Hill Residents Committee to do the consultation on the lights, and that's reflected in their resolution. And certainly before we go up there and turn anything off, we'll be consulting and or advising the residents that this is an action that the council will be undertaking, and no doubt we'll receive comments back on that, but we'll work through that with Councillor Bob and Councillor Jenny in terms of how that sort of progresses, but certainly it's more advising as opposed to consulting at the moment. In regards to your question about coastal shipping, yeah, that's a bit interesting in regards to a Selwyn context, but in terms of getting more freight on trains, I think the where I can give you that comfort is that through the NZ Up project here at Rolleston, the Rolleston Access project, there is a proportion of the funding that's been allocated by the government. I think it's somewhere in the order between $7 and $10 million that goes to rail improvements at Rolleston here to facilitate better rail connections and getting more efficiencies in the rail network and getting connections to those to inland ports. So I think that's where we get our share of it, if you want to put it that way at the moment.
Thank you. And a lot of your explanation, I'm happy to support point C.
Great, thank you, Shane and Nicole.
Thanks for the report, Andrew. And yeah, second, congratulations on what you managed to achieve with what you got from NZTA. It was a phenomenal amount of work to do this. And yes, as with the others, I would support C for using that money. Now, one thing I see is, which was obviously an interest with me last term being the chair of the Road Safety Committee, is the increase in road safety funding. So 62% increase through into this time. So there's probably more one for David or Murray Washington. Would it be possible if we could actually have the road safety coordinators come and give us a paper or presentation about what they're actually doing? We've had these reports that tacked on to the end of the report, the bi-monthly reports, but it would be good that they actually came and saw us and see what they're doing for the next year, because that's quite a significant amount of money that's being used for road safety. Thank you.
I acknowledge that point. Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll look to include that. Nicole, great suggestion. David.
Yeah, good suggestion of Nicole's, and we will take a note to add that to a future briefing meeting. I think, Mr Mayor, also it would be prudent to record a resolution to the effect that Council supports Andrew's funding proposal. It's sort of been unilaterally agreed around the meeting, but I think that would solidify the staff position and allow them to proceed formally.
Yep, I've got the wording, my suggested wording. Agree the use of our $1 million for non-NZTA funding to meet the project shortfalls to complete the Council's annual Footpath Extension program to Glen Tunnel to Whitecliff's cycleway, school frontage, safety upgrades and small bridge replacements, which is just a copy and paste from the 4 bullet points within our agenda. So the resolution will be that we receive the report, and secondly, that we confirm that funding. Andrew, that gives you what you need? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really great. We can get cracking and start. So we've got things lined up already pretty much to get the Footpath Extension contract out to tender. And obviously now we can get also going with the Glen Tunnel to Whitecliff cycleway and getting that designed. So that's underway as soon as possible. So yeah, no, thank you very much. That's a great outcome and being able to have that certainty at this point.
Well, we won't move anything or vote on it yet. We'll just hear from Mark Chamberlain, and you're part of the report. So thanks, Andrew, for that. And Mark, I'll hand over to you. Mark, we can't hear you. You don't appear to be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. must have been the new webcam they put in at the desk. I didn't want you to see the people sitting behind me, busy working away. I was just going to say about the footpath extensions. We're looking to have a 3-year contract for that. So just in the resolution, using that $1 million is available for the next 3 years, each of the next 3 years, or is it just for 1 year? Or just confirming that probably just needs a wee bit of discussion. But yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's the projects that were unfunded by NZTA, and as Andrew said, that will equal about $600,000 worth of this funding. So if that's the limit of what we're talking about, that's a tone of council's discussion. If there's lots of other projects in years 2 and 3 that aren't included in that 600, then we'd just need to know what they are and what the total amount would be contributing would look like.
Yeah, okay, we'd have to just work through that. Just working through a few comments. I'll take the report as read, but just a few comments from you said. The welcome to township signs and things like that, in terms of having those, there's standard threshold signs that we probably should use that are approved, which can have the bilingual, there's something that's approved. Just looking at the numbers that we've got around the district, the townships, so every township has the same sort of signage on it. We're talking about $200,000 about that to put those signs in place. Some have already got them, but that's about the cost just for those township entry signs. So that's just something to consider. The comment about the Harper Road maintenance, that's mainly been done through the emergency works after heavy rain event. So that's enabled us to do that. Just a comment on that. Our funding from NZTA hasn't been approved for that yet. The emergency works, that's still being talked about. We're going to get it, but it hasn't been approved yet. So that and the late confirmation of our budgets, NZTA, means that we haven't been able to claim the subsidy in the claims that were made to NZTA. So Carl will probably explain in a financial report, just it looks a bit out of kilter at the moment in terms of what work we've done, what we've paid and the subsidy we received. The Harper Road Bridge, yeah, there's been a discussion with ECAN prior to lodging the consent with them just to get it all lined up to smooth out the consent process. That took a long time to get agreement on that, but that's with ECAN now and it shouldn't be very far away. So we're ready to start the bridge replacement as soon as that consent's approved. So it should be pretty close because it has been lodged with them now. Couple of other things. Maintenance. So yeah, maintenance has been dominated by the heavy rain repairs as well as other routine maintenance that's going on around the network. And planning for unsealed maintenance meddling and reseals is looking acknowledge all the great work that's been done in terms of getting the funding we've got. It is unsealed roads haven't had much of an increase, and that's an area where we still get a lot of calls. And as councillors will know, you get calls about the state of the unsealed roads. It's not really a place where we can actually spend a lot more because it hasn't got the funding, and it is all the funding increase we've had is a bit of a catch up. So we're not necessarily able to improve the network a lot, but we're able to do a lot more than we're able to do. And so hopefully the next 3 years after that will be get another lot again and just keep on going just with the growth of the network. Speed limits was another thing that's just looking at the Greater Christchurch Partnership area map. We've got a lot of work to do with speed management plan in the future, and just a consideration of that map of the Greater Christchurch area is probably lends itself to be an area where we could have 80k speed limits on our rural roads because it's Greater Christchurch, more residents on those roads and that sort of thing, whether that's something to be considered in the future. But that is a project for next year that will take a bit of time to get our future speed management in place, which includes speed limits as well as signage, and whether it's the welcome to signage for the district, townships, and some infrastructure changes, for example, in CBDs or in townships like Springs Road, Peel and Gerald Street, Lincoln, to engineer them up so that a lower speed limit makes more sense to drivers rather than just like it's been done on Tennyson Street. It actually looks like the centre of a town rather than a road that you just drive through. So a bit of work needs to be done as well, not just putting the speed limit in place, but having engineering that actually reinforces that as well. And I think that was about it. And I'm sure Jessica and Steph would love to come and speak to council about road safety and things like that. I say they're both very good at sort of putting that across. So I'll have a discussion with them when they're in the office next time. So I think that's all from me at this stage. If there's going to be questions.
Great, Mark. Thank you for that. And just reiterate some of the comments around the good work on flooding repairs. Huge amount of work's gone into Wainewa Road, Pig Saddle Road, Melbourne Hills Road, spaces that have given us trouble, a lot of trouble, were severely impacted by the floods. And to drive on them now, they're really top quality finishes. So well done to you and the team for pulling that together. yeah, it wouldn't have been cheap. Truckloads of gravel has gone in there. So well done on focusing that.
And one Keynes Road in the background there as well. So
right. Just thinking about your question and the funding, can you confirm is the $600,000 that Andrew mentioned earlier ish to cover all of those projects? Does that include the 3 years of annual footpath extension program, or is that 1 year of annual footpath extension?
Andrew Bell would answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. The 600,000 is basically just for the first year. It has another, in the first year, it has a couple of sort of significant standalone projects like the White Cliffs to Glen Tunnel Cycleway, which bumps it up. But when you start then going into the next 2 years, and I'm just trying to find my figures here, it drops down to around 250,000 a year in regards to then ticking over, if you want to put it that way, that footpath extension program and those other smaller projects. So yeah, the big hits in the first year, this year, the 600,000, then as I say, it drops around to about 250,000 in the next 2 years after that. So that's the context of it. But whether or not you want to consider that further in the future or through an annual plan process, I'm not sure, but that's basically in terms of where we're at. But this year, we need extra 600,000 to make it work, and that's what coming from the 1 million.
Okay, so I think we'll just focus on this year's agreement then, and even though that 250, there's another million next year, so this would be 250 out of that and leave 750 for other projects. But just given the timeframes for making a decision now and not having that detail for full consideration, I think we make a decision on this current year, and it's a 2021-22 decision, and the future $1 million will be for a decision after this point in time. Yep. Nicole and Shane.
Thanks, Mark. So speed limits, you've had over 250 submissions to date. That's quite more significant than what we normally have, isn't it, for so far for speed limit consultation?
Yeah, I think people being at home may have had more access to make submissions. Yes. Been probably up to 300 now, I think, and the usual mix of comments, either people living on the roads are in support, others are saying, why don't you just fix the roads, why don't you fix the quality of driving and things like that. So a lot of those sorts of comments in there that don't really contribute very much, as well as people are either in support or against. Some people just don't like going slower around the place, so you can, that's a fairly normal response to those. But yeah, there's quite a bit of response there. I'd say there's a lot more work next year on the speed management plan, and it'll be interesting to see how many comments we get on that, because that's quite a big work and sets our path for the next 3 and then 6 years after that. So yeah, the normal comments have been received so far. The ones that I've read, there's quite a lot of reading involved in them.
Yes, there would be. Thanks for that.
And Shane.
Kia ora, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair. Great work, Mark. Thank you very much for the report, and especially the success on the funding for Leaston Road and Goulds Road intersection. We've had a number of serious accidents on that corner, so it's really good to see that, one, a part of the plan, and two, to get the funding across. So well done, and you'll have a number of very happy residents and families that have been had accidents on that road supporting you. The second question is, with the extra funding coming to the table, does that mean that the Goulds Road, Ellesmere Road junction will be funded for? I see that was supposed to be, this was meant to be part of the, to be paired with Goulds Road and Leaston Road intersection, which has been approved. It's the sort of comment on the side there. Do you see that happening now?
I can't take any credit for the projects that have been approved in there. Andrew can take that. But why one is, I think the intention was to have them both done. Why one and not the other, I'm not too sure. So I don't think that was one that we were looking at, using the extra funding for, Andrew, but certainly the Leaston Goulds Road does need a bit of work on it. So we're actually just looking at updating the signs on that following a recent assessment, but they can be incorporated into whatever we do in terms of splitter islands and right turn bays area, which is what the intention is for the area.
Yeah, just to chime in there, it was the two intersection upgrades were part of our low cost, low risk program. So they funded one, which was great, which is the Goulds Leaston Road one, which is probably the one with the worst crash history. and I was trying to get it paired with the other one on Ellesmere Junction Road, which they declined. But as I said, my discussions with the agency still haven't, I haven't finished with some of those discussions, and I'm working whatever angles I can to make things happen, hopefully.
Thank you for that. Grant. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Grant.
So it sounds like it could be fun negotiating where this extra million's going to go. Certain the Springswood, our councillors have a lot of places we could spend the money. Mark, talking about 5.4 road maintenance and renewals, just an inquiry. When we renewed our roading contract, the roading contractor made quite a big play on its technology offer, particularly around having an app available for where road maintenance was to be delivered. I haven't seen that delivered yet. Are you aware of where that's at?
Yeah, they're still working on that. I'll be able to get an app and a QR code that could be scanned, and I know they've tested it on for Cuban Channel just recently and sent through, and that worked, brings it up on the map. So I'll follow up with them again, and yeah, that should be able to be done reasonably quickly, but it's something that should be included. We can be even logged in council call on our website and things like that, so people would just scan it. So.
That was the understanding from the contract letter. It was ready to go, and we were sort of see it imminently. So that's 8 months ago, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just having the program in place to actually show up on it. So the program for the work for this financial year just need to be on it rather than stuff that was a bit more historic. So yeah, I take your point there.
And Deborah.
Thank you. Thanks for Leaston Goulds Road upgrade. Appreciate that. With regards to Ellesmere Junction and Goulds Road, it's very difficult to navigate at night if you're actually turning either a left-hand turn, a right-hand turn to Rolleston, or a left-hand turn down to Goulds Road, because there's no street lighting to highlight that that's actually an intersection. As you travel down Goulds Road, you actually do get the attraction of the stop sign coming forward, but there's no street light there for a major intersection. What's our policy on street lighting for major intersections?
We haven't got one for that specifically, but we looked at for flag lights for rural intersections, and it needs to be funded, of course, and that's something that comes at a low cost, low risk, or has been minor improvements in the past. So how that could be fitted in there with the other projects being done as well. There are issues with that intersection in terms of the high voltage that's there. So it needs a transformer to put a street light in there, which means that you're spending sort of $20,000 if you're just putting one light. But if we're doing an upgraded intersection in terms of split lines, right turn bays, street lighting will be part of that upgrade when and if that gets done.
Thank you.
If I may chime in just quickly, part of the low cost, low risk program that I'd put forward included $180,000 of discretionary funding per year to undertake intersection safety upgrades across the district, where that would be including installing lighting, putting in a median splitter island, or what have you. That was declined by the agency. So I think we'll get over this first hurdle of this year, which you've given us the way forward on that. Thank you very much. But when we come to the successive years of the program, when we talk to you further, we may have to have this discussion around how we, backfill that type of, able to do that type of work as well, so that we can just sort of keep on top of these sort of type of requests going forward.
Thank you very much for that report, both Andrew and Mark. So it'll be that the Council A receives the report as is here, and B agree the use of 2021-2022 $1 million of non-NZTA funding to meet project shortfalls to complete 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points as suggested in the document. Moved Councillor Mugford and seconded Councillor Bland. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, please speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item on our agendas is property transaction update, and welcome Douglas Marshall to the meeting. Douglas, you take the report as read, and I'll hand over to you to give us any highlights.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just happy to take any questions on this report for Rob Allen or myself.
Great. Councillors, is there anything through the report that you'd like to raise? There have been none. We've moved and a seconder for the report. Moved Lyle, seconded Alexander. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Speak up now. Declare it carried. Thanks, Douglas. And we now move to resolution to exclude the public. Our mover, Malcolm Lyle, seconded Reid. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you very much for joining us for this meeting today. If you've been watching online, live or later, thank you. Declare this part of the meeting finished, and we'll take an adjournment for 15 minutes and begin again at 2:30 with the PX portion of today's council meeting. Thank you.